This happened to me a couple of years ago, and even now it gives me chills when I think about it. It was late at night and I was walking home. The streets were empty, with only a few dim streetlights flickering in the dark. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a missed call. I glanced at the screen and froze. The call had come from my own landline number. The problem is that phone line had been disconnected for years. Nobody had used it since I moved in. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of glitch, but curiosity got the better of me. I called back. It rang a few times, and then I heard it. Heavy, uneven breathing on the other end. No words, just breathing, like someone was standing right next to the handset, listening. My heart dropped, and I hung up immediately. The next day, my neighbor casually mentioned something that terrified me even more. She said she had seen lights on in my house late that night. The thing is, I live alone, and I hadn't even been home yet. I still don't know who or what was on the other end of that call, and honestly, I don't want to find out. I used to live in an old apartment building in a small city. The place was cheap, and honestly, that was the only reason I rented it. The walls were thin, the pipes groaned all night, and the elevator barely worked. But the worst part wasn't the apartment itself. It was the man who lived directly below me. I first noticed him a few days after moving in. I was unpacking boxes when I heard someone knock on my door. Standing there was this older man, probably in his late 50s, with messy hair and eyes that seemed a little too wide, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't introduce himself. He just stared for a moment and said in this flat, monotone voice, "Don't drag furniture at night." I can hear everything I told him I understood, and he left without another word. I thought it was strange, but I didn't want any problems, so I just brushed it off. Over the next few weeks, though, things got unsettling. I'd sometimes wake up at night and hear footsteps in my apartment. Slow, heavy steps, moving from the kitchen to the living room. But when I got up to check, nothing was out of place. I convinced myself it was just noise traveling through the old building. Then one night, I was lying in bed around 2 a.m. when I heard something that made my blood run cold. From right below my floorboards came the sound of someone whispering. At first I thought maybe he had guests over, but then I realized the voice was whispering my name, over and over again. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, but I was wide awake, and the whispering was so clear, like he was standing just beneath my bed. The next morning, I went downstairs, trying to convince myself to ask him what the hell was going on. But when I knocked on his door, no one answered. I tried again the next day, and the day after that. Nothing. The door stayed shut. A week later, I came home from work and noticed the landlord in the hallway. I asked him about the man in 3B, the apartment below mine. The landlord gave me a confused look and said, "That place has been empty for months. No one's lived there since the last tenant passed away." I felt sick. I tried to explain that I'd seen him, that he'd even come to my door, but the landlord just shook his head and said it wasn't possible. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the building made me jump. And just when I was starting to drift off, I heard it again. That same flat, monotone voice from below, whispering through the floorboards. "Don't drag furniture at night." I can hear everything. I moved out 2 weeks later. To this day, I don't know if what I saw was real or if I imagined it. But one thing I'm sure of. Something was in that apartment, and it knew my name. It was late at night, close to midnight, and I was driving home on a long, empty country road. The kind of road that feels like it stretches forever into the darkness. There were no streetlights, no other cars, not even houses nearby. Just endless fields on both sides, and the sound of my tires rolling over the pavement. The only light came from my headlights, cutting through the black night. I was tired but alert. I remember thinking about how quiet everything felt. Too quiet. There's a certain kind of silence you only hear when you're alone that late at night. Heavy, unnatural, almost pressing down on you. And then I saw him. On the right side of the road, just at the edge of the grass, stood a boy. He looked about 7 or 8 years old, barefoot, dressed in thin pajamas, the kind with little buttons down the front. His hair was messy, like he had just rolled out of bed, and he was completely still. Not moving, not shivering, nothing. Just standing there, staring at the road. My heart jumped into my throat. I hit the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked against my chest. My first thought was, what is a child doing out here in the middle of the night? There were no houses for miles. I rolled down the window and called out to him, asking if he was okay. My voice sounded too loud in the silence. He didn't respond, didn't even flinch. He just kept staring ahead. And for a moment, I couldn't even see his face properly. It was like the shadows clung to him, hiding his features, even though my headlights were shining right at him. Something about that. It didn't feel right. Still, I couldn't just drive off and leave a child alone on the side of the road. So, I opened my door and stepped out. The night air was cold, and I remember hearing the sound of crickets stop all at once, like even they were holding their breath. I walked slowly toward him. One step, another. I called to him again. Nothing. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and aimed it toward the ground as I walked. For just a second, I looked away, trying to light the uneven road so I wouldn't trip. And when I lifted the light back toward him, he was gone. Just like that. There was nothing. No sound of footsteps running away. No movement in the grass. The boy had completely vanished in the span of a heartbeat. I froze in place, my stomach twisting. I spun the light around, checking the ditch, the bushes, the field beside the road. There was nowhere he could have gone so quickly. The road stretched out in both directions, empty. But he wasn't there anymore. I don't know how long I stood there, holding my breath, my ears straining for any sound. Finally, with my hands shaking, I rushed back to my car, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I sat there for a minute, staring out the window, hoping he would reappear. But the roadside was completely empty, like he had never been there at all. The next day, I told my neighbor about it. At first, she just looked at me, not saying anything. Then, she sighed and said quietly, "Years ago, right on that stretch of road, there was a terrible accident. A family was driving home late at night. Their little boy, about the same age you described, he didn't survive. He died instantly. I felt the blood drain from my face, because the boy I saw wasn't dressed for a car ride. He wasn't wearing shoes. He was in pajamas, just like a child pulled out of bed in the middle of the night." That realization hit me like ice water. I hadn't just seen some lost child. I had seen something else. Since then, I've avoided that road whenever possible. But sometimes, when I can't, I catch myself staring at the edge of the pavement, half expecting to see that boy again. standing there in his pajamas, silent, watching. And I know, if I ever see him again, I'm not sure I'd be brave enough to stop.